So again, we're back to that same freaking conversation about how to make the space financially viable, but at the same time make it safe for marginalized communities. Solve this problem for me, Nix.
See, unfortunately, we can't keep the space safe for folks who are marginalized when the people with privilege don't recognize their privilege. And it takes a lot of emotional and just a lot of energy in general, and labor to educate people when they don't want to be educated.
Right? No, absolutely. And I think like whenever we talk about money as a nonprofit, especially one that like our volunteer group, they put on those 18 plus events in order to bring some money in. So whenever we talk about money, we always end up in this situation where somebody is like, well, one, sell more alcohol at your events. Can you think of a problem with that?
There's a lot of problems with serving alcohol when there's, the fun stuff that we do here. And that involves consent, which is something we're super big on here.
And I mean, not just here, like all of us tend to be consent advocates in our personal lives as well and in other domains and whatnot. But yeah, like a lot of the fundraising events that we host include things that really focus on that sex positivity. So destigmatizing bodies and destigmatizing nudity and allowing people to explore consensual sexual activity in a place where their safety is paramount. And we can't do that if they're all intoxicated. But even if we were doing like an education series and we were catering it and people were drinking over lunch, I wonder how receptive people with more privilege would be to being called in after a couple of beers as compared to without those couple of beers. Because we already had a lot of resistance when we try to tell somebody who typically just doesn't have to think about these things, right?
Yeah.
Like they don't have to think about racialized comments. What is it that we're hearing all the time? We're too PC, right? And yeah, I always laugh too because, I want to ask, right? Like, what is it you would like to say about people that you're not allowed to say here? Do
Yeah.
tell me, you know? Um, and the ableism stuff comes up a lot, by the way, when we talk about that. Like I get told all the time, like that's just over the top. And I understand that. And it's the one I have the hardest calling people in for because it is so predominant through the way that we talk in society. Right? Like that's how we talk. And the argument people have is like when you say something like that, and for anybody listening or watching, ableism is like when we use words like stupid or crazy or anything that refers to placing more value on people who have a higher intelligence or more physical ability or more cognitive ability than people who don't. That's like ableism. And they argue that like when we use those words, everybody knows we're not actually talking about somebody's IQ, right?
Yeah.
We're not actually talking about their physical ability. We're just saying that their behavior is a piece of crap right now. And it's like, and that's great. Is there another way you could say that that didn't harm millions of people who struggle with mental health or intellectual disability or physical disability?
Mm-hmm.
And then the other thing that comes up all the time is people telling us that we make the people who have money to spend in a space like ours, that we make them feel unsafe because of all our rules and stuff. Did you want to talk about that?
Um, I mean, a little, because my spouse is one of those people. Um, it's it's a challenge to navigate that because they feel unsafe because they're being challenged and not because they're actually being oppressed. And
And
I have no idea
see,
how to express that.
I would like them to understand the difference between feeling unsafe, like fearing for your safety is what unsafe means, versus feeling uncomfortable or feeling inept, right? Because those are different things.
Yeah.
So being put in a position where suddenly you're aware of things that you do wrong is not a safety matter. Like that's not safety, you know.
No.
Challenging,
And
it's uncomfortable.
yeah, there's a couple emails I have to send over the next while that just say like we have to provide a safe space for everyone, and that includes the people that feel unsafe when you talk about X, Y, or Z. So I'm
Will
really
you
not looking forward to those.
okay, will you say that again? So you're
Um,
saying you have emails from people telling us that we're obliged to provide a safe space to everyone?
no. The safe space is for, I'm saying the safe space is for everyone, including those who are feeling oppressed.
Well, specifically for people who are oppressed. But being white and cis and heterosexual is not being oppressed.
At all, no.
So it sounds low like you've got folks speaking to that, like asking about that.
It
You
was a
mentioned
matter of,
responding to emails.
yeah, it was a matter of like, I sent out a call out for volunteers and I got a couple emails back going, we don't feel safe there because our views are considered problematic and don't we don't like that. And I'm just like, that's not what unsafe means, but I'm going to gently challenge this because otherwise you just don't get your point across.
Oh, honestly, I'm surprised that they bothered to respond. Because what I've noticed is that when people come into the space, and I want to be really clear to folks that this is predominantly white, masculine presenting, able-bodied, heterosexual, cisgendered men, right, that come
Yeah.
into the space. Although we have seen that they don't necessarily need to be white, that
Nope.
there's a lot of masculine people of color that come into this space that have that same discomfort when they're being told that they have to behave a certain way. But like that masculine privilege seems to be nearly impossible to work around. And there are some white, cis, heterosexual female persons who also feel very restricted in our space. And I understand that because we're actually asking people to do a lot of emotional work that they're not used to doing. Like a lot. Like when you come
Yes.
into a space like ASPECC, you have to be aware that the tone of your skin, something you have no control over, right, changes the way you intersect with the world. And it's not comfortable in a society that's taught us that we can just go willy-nilly through the world without worrying about these things because they don't impact us. It's uncomfortable to be like, wow, I'm a white person sitting in a room of people with less privilege than me because of my skin tone. I need to hold space so that they can talk, right? I need to give more weight to their experience. That's really hard work because, we've gone through life going, la, 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 the world's built for me, right? And that's, I think it's easier to never do that work. Like it's easier to never give a shit. But it
We had a
also really,
conversation, sorry, we had a conversation personally about this yesterday about how I had no idea what I was doing or like how problematic my behavior was until I had it pointed out to me in university. And all of a sudden I was like, oh, I've got work to do. And I've been trying for 7 years to do that work. Just so everyone knows, like it's a process that you go through every single day. It's not something that you just snap your fingers and it's done.
and it's a choice that you have to make in every moment. And
Yes.
so, to all the people who've been called in, and calling in just means, as something you said or did was pointed out to you as problematic. And typically at ASPECC, we just say, hey, we don't say or do that here, or we try not to say and do that here, and this is why, or because. We give you the reason, and you do with it what you want, right? But for folks who've been called in and they felt uncomfortable and they felt attacked, I invite you to really sit with what it actually means to be somebody who doesn't meet the standard of whatever privilege looks like. You know what I mean? Like, regardless of what we're looking at. So how do you, as somebody who can get pulled over by police without worrying about being killed, who can send your kids to school without wondering if they're getting the same education as the white kids one community over, who can, look around at your peers and see that everybody's got an education or a trade certificate and is has their own home and things like that, as compared to people who look around and see that all their peers are accessing social services. Sometimes they're homeless or they're living in really crap neighborhoods, and buying a house is like not even on their radar. Like when we look at all of these things that intersect and impact the opportunities we have, how do you sit there and go, I feel attacked for having to think about that? Like, and it's okay to be uncomfortable and it's okay to have that moment of defensive, but we need to not act on it in that moment, right? Like we need to sit with it and be like, I'm feeling really uncomfortable, and recognize that it's actually a symptom of the privilege that we have, that we've never had to consider that before. It's not our fault that we didn't have to consider it, but it does provide us with an opportunity to recognize other people for things they can't control, didn't have the same opportunities. But I think that until people are ready to hear that, there's nothing you can say to make them hear it.
Unfortunately not, no.
So how do we move forward? Like this is like an ongoing problem. Every time we host an open house and we talk about the finances or we run a fundraiser, somebody's like, if you relaxed your rules or whatever, like people with money would come and use the space and you'd have more income. But like the whole point is to provide a space for people who typically don't have anywhere to go without putting up with the emotional and physical and sexual harm that comes from not being part of the privileged demographic, right? So like, how do we balance that?
If we knew that, we'd be rich.
Right?
Yeah, it's I sit here every day, especially the days that I have meetings with my fundraising team, and go, what do we do?
Because our members are poor.
Yeah.
Typically. I mean, we have a few members that aren't. Like, thank you folks for supporting ASPECC. And I want to be clear that we have lots of people who come from very privileged backgrounds that are doing what they can to support this space. But the people that it impacts the most don't have the resources to support the space. That's why the space is here, because they can't access the same thing in other spaces.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
yeah,
Mark and I could walk into any bar or restaurant or club or whatever, it'd be okay. I can't say that for other people in our group. Not that we have the financial resources to be the support either. Unfortunately, got hit with that queer stick and that's it.
Yeah.
Right? It's a good stick. And then the other aspect that we hear all the time is like, we're an education center, so we need to get out there and educate people instead of telling them what they're doing wrong.
Cool. Do you want to pay us for it? Or are you expecting us to do it for free?
Well, free.
Then no.
Right. Even when we first started running like kink classes, there were people from the BDSM community that were horrified that we were charging money for those classes. They wanted them for free. Oh yeah. Because there's been a long-standing tradition here in Edmonton of the community members just offering these workshops at no cost to the community as part of a benefit of being in the community. And that's great, except we weren't offering them to benefit the kink community. We were offering them to benefit the greater community that was doing things unsafely and to bring funds in.
Yeah.
So it's like, and we're always doing that dance, right? What do we charge so that we can keep it accessible? What do we charge in order to keep the space open? And how do we kind of balance that out?
I find it funny that they were horrified because I do know that lots of organizations in the city, and by lots I mean there's not that many, but quite a few of them do charge for their workshops, and it's just enough to keep them open and pay the rent, which is exactly what we're doing.
And I think this goes back to the COPE days. right? When
Yeah.
that existed, because once a month, the day of their party, during the day, you could go and take whatever workshop was going on, and it
Right.
was free, right? So when I
Mm-hmm.
started doing rope classes and charging money, they're like, you can't do that. And people were like, I was asking people to put money in to cover gas for the
Yep.
furnace, and they were like, I just won't go. It's like, okay. You know, but outside of the kink community, people see value in that. And I think it's the same thing. Well, it's almost the opposite when it comes to social justice and learning how to be a safe person for people with less privilege to be around. And how to recognize how we intersect, right? Like everybody has different things that are going on. It's not you have all the privilege, you have none, typically, although there
Mm-hmm.
are those extremes. And it's more like, where is your privilege and where do you experience oppression, and recognize that those experiences change from person to person. And
Mm-hmm.
but when it comes to those kinds of workshops, people want that for free. Like, you're queer, don't you want people to understand you better? Like,
Yeah.
Nick's, you're gender queer. You should just walk around teaching people for free. This should be your new calling.
I mean, I already do, and it's exhausting. So please compensate me so that I can feed myself. That's that's the that's the thing of it. Like, we don't expect people to make the coffee that we purchase at Starbucks for free. So why are we expecting people who have the lived experience to provide you a service without providing them compensation in turn? And whether that's a service yourself or financial compensation of some kind. Yeah.
I agree. But I think, I wonder sometimes if what people are getting stuck on is, like, for example, if I teach about consent and about bodily autonomy and about some of the really fucked up gender ideas we have about sex and sexuality, particularly how that impacts consent and sexual assault and things like that, people are like, well, that benefits you, right? So you should want people to have that information. And I do want people to have that information. And I want to continue growing my information so I can participate in a positive way. But I had to pay for the books and the courses and the training and the lectures and the conventions and the symposiums. And then
Mm-hmm.
people expect me to come back and be like, because it's important to me, I will just give that to you. And it's like, with what? Like, what's
Yeah.
left at the end of the day? Whereas, I think in our space, we see people are more willing to pay for things that talk about how to have better orgasms, how to build sexier relationships, how to safely give somebody an erotic spanking, but they're not willing to pay the organization when we go into their space to teach sexual health. Like, we should do that for free. And I even agree that they shouldn't have to pay for it. I think the government should have that money out there. So
Yes.
organizations can just book you and you get like a commission or something. But like, that's not a thing. So, you know, like the amount of QSAs and colleges and stuff that we've taught at, and we don't get paid for that.
No. No. Or, well, I mean, to be fair, they don't have money either. So,
Well, colleges have money.
yeah, but the clubs don't. So,
No, the QSAs don't. The senior centers don't often have money.
no.
And I get that. Which is why we're not like really aggressive about getting paid. But at the same time, that community compassion is starting to impact our ability to offer the space, to offer the education, to just show up and provide an opportunity for people to learn, to be safe, to, you know,
Which is why the Pleasure Crew hosts their events at ASPECC. They're
which
trying to help
is,
us out.
yeah, and I super appreciate it.
Me too. Those volunteers put in a lot of work. So,
Yeah. So, what do you think we can do to appeal to people with more privilege as a worthy organization to be supported? Like, there's got to be a way, right?
yeah.
Without compromising on the safety of the space.
Um, so one of the fellow board members and myself sat down and talked about providing paid education to companies, talking about power and privilege and such, which provides advertisement for us, which would bring them out. Some of them, not all of them. And that kind of like opens the door to a whole new demographic, but then that requires people to go out to companies, specifically oil and gas companies, and put themselves in a compromising situation, because those people, from personal experience, because I grew up in the oil and gas industry and my husband
Me
works in the
too.
oil and gas,
Yeah.
they
It can be a challenging demographic.
yeah, and it's the senior staff who need the education so that they can do their bro thing to tell the other guys to cut it out.
Yeah, and I want to say that, like from what I know from people that I know that have worked city jobs, that they talk all the time about how you see this big gap, right? Like people come in, they do the sensitivity training and whatever, and then they leave. And it's that lower management, the management that has direct interactions with the frontline staff that
Mm-hmm.
need to be re-educated.
Yes.
And because, and yeah, there's like staff that are definitely stuck in that rigid way of thinking that doesn't include room for people from marginalized communities. But the only reason that they're able to act on those values that they have is because their direct management supports those behaviors.
Mm-hmm. And that's kind of where we were going with that, is that if we provide this education piece, not only is that advertisement for our organization, but it also starts the process of changing the way people look and think about things. This specific board member is part of that industry, so it was actually his idea to do it. So
That's awesome. I don't
yeah.
know, it's something that you and I've talked about a lot, but
Mm-hmm.
until somebody's willing to take on some of the tasks that I'm doing that just keep us barely open,
Yep.
I don't have the energy. You know,
Nope.
like I would love to be out there teaching those classes, and I'm totally comfortable with tradespeople being demonstrating some of the ignorance that they might have about the topic,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm used to it. I'm from Fort St. John, right? So
Yeah.
it's like the Fort Nelson of BC, um, or the Fort Mac, sorry, of BC.
Yeah.
It's something else, but I can't continue to do all the things. And that's the other aspect that I think people don't realize. Like a lot of folks, I think, see our organization and they think it's a kink club. Like I think it's a BDSM community or a swingers community or a poly community, depending on where they intersected.
Yeah.
Right? They only see what we have that intrigues them or what we have that titillates them, whether that could be a negative thing as well. And they don't look at the education component. They don't look at the youth groups. They don't look at the community outreach. They don't look at, all that research that goes into creating the workshops, to training
Mm-hmm.
people to offer the workshops, or what it takes to run the space on a 24/7. And, they don't know about the overdose program. They don't know about and it's frustrating. And people are like, oh, you need to advertise that more. And it's like, I would love to. Where do we get the money for that?
Yeah.
Like I know advertising is an important part of the budget, but it's like, do I get overdose kits in or do I advertise? Right? Do we buy gloves and PPE for people to keep them safe? Or do we get a radio ad? Like it's
Yeah.
because it's one or the other. Like we can't do both. The overdose program was not the appropriate. So just so everybody knows, the overdose program actually doesn't cost us anything except for manpower time, right?
Yeah.
Human power time? People power
Um,
time.
yeah.
I didn't like the way that sounded. But yeah, except for the human resources, right? Like somebody
Yeah.
has to monitor that account. We've got to track the kits as they come in. We got to be here to hand them out when people need them. We have to, like, all these things come into play, but the kits themselves don't cost money. It's the resources that go into offering the program that are costing us. Did you hear my minions?
No.
No.
Yeah, we I think having some volunteers who come from that demographic would help too. The ones that are less problematic, because then they can help provide that education piece to the ones coming in. And unfortunately, those with mask privilege tend to listen to others with mask privilege.
What? Yeah, we've
I
talked
know,
about that a
right?
lot. Well, we've been babbling for like half an hour, so I just kind of want to wrap us up with for folks who feel uncomfortable coming into the space because they're being asked to really think about how the things they say and do impact people who might not look like them, might not have relationships like them, might not express gender like them. I get it. I mean, you can see me. I get it, right? But I promise you that the first time you watch somebody just totally relax in front of you and go, like, thank you, you really realize just how much pain you cause people inadvertently just by the language that you use that comes from a place of privilege, right? And I can tell you millions of stories of times where I've gotten to witness how impactful a land statement is, or introducing yourselves with pronouns. And these things cost us nothing. I think they literally cost nothing to be like, hey, my name is, here's my pronouns. Like, that is not a challenging thing to do. It
No.
feels weird. It feels odd. We can feel uncomfortable. Costs us nothing.
Yeah.
And it means the world to people who aren't sure if they're going to be treated like they're a human being because of their gender.
Hello, non-binary, can confirm.
Right? And
Yeah.
it's not a hard thing to do. And when it is difficult, like, and you're feeling it and you're feeling that resistance, like, just recognize that that's like an opportunity for looking at what's causing you the discomfort, and just a moment of self-growth, whatever, wherever that takes you. It doesn't have to, you don't have to do it my way, right? Wherever that takes you, like, take that opportunity to be like, I've never had to feel this uncomfortable before, because I normally get to walk into places and the culture is all about me because I'm part of the predominant culture. I'm white. I'm het presenting. Pardon me. I'm physically abled. I don't have to rely on assisted devices and that kind of thing. I have a lot of ways in which I can interact with society without worrying about it. When I come into ASPECC, I suddenly have to check myself. It feels weird. So, like, know that those feelings are normal. It's okay to have those feelings, but you want to make sure that you're moving forward in a way that you're going to be comfortable with 5 years from now too, right? So, like, you have the information now. It's your choice what you do with the information. And as far as the money's concerned, if you have solutions for us to be able to continuously provide the Safer Space program the way that we've done it, where people from the most marginalized community, trans women of color, people with physical disabilities, queer people from cultures where that is heavily stigmatized, where those people all feel that they can utilize the space in a way that's safe while still bringing in more money, we'd love to hear it.
Yes.
But make it safer for people with privilege to be rude and dismissive to people who face oppression in every avenue of their lives is not the solution that we can go with.
No.
Anything you want to add, Nix?
No, I think you actually covered it really, really well.
I super appreciate you coming out to talk about this. I know that talking about the money is not a fun place.
No, but it's
not the
something I
fun
do
thing.
every day.
And
So.
yeah, pay us to do the emotional labor for you.
Please, I'm hungry.
Right. Okay, folks, we'll talk to you soon.
Bye-bye.